Milo Yiannopoulos is one of the heroes of our movement. Not given his due by the conservative masses. When Milo came on the scene, I had been speaking on college campuses, about 300 of them, for 20 years. And it was very predictable. If a conservative came to campus, he would, or she would be speaking to a rather small conservative audience. And the reason is that these communist professors, which is what they are, organize boycotts of conservative speakers. They would tell their students not to attend conservative events. And they would reward, if a leftist came, Billy Ayers came through, they would give you credits, school credits, to attend. So that meant...
It's taken away for coming to see me.
Yeah.
The people that didn't graduate for coming to see me.
So that meant that only activists really were present. And then Milo came on the scene, and suddenly he was speaking to 1,000 students, and what struck me most, if you watch the videos, was that these were fraternity kids. These were the kids who kind of were sort of turned off whatever's going on at the school. It's not athletics or fun. And so he was reaching the real core for the first time. And the reason he could do it is two. One, Milo is a brilliant intellectual. If you haven't read his book, Dangerous, this is the best book. It just wipes out the so-called politically correct culture, which political correctness is the Communist Party line. That's what it is. It's just a brilliant book. But he's also a brilliant performance artist. So they set out, the left is very clear. Let's see, the Soviets used to have a saying, the sunflower that grows the tallest gets its head lopped off first. So they go after any one of our people that has an impact, they set out to destroy. And so they set out to destroy Milo. And unfortunately, we don't have yet, we're nowhere near having the sense of solidarity in the battle. That doesn't mean you have to cover up every blemish or whatever sin that our people commit. But you'll notice that the Democrats, they have no compunction. They got a racist, pro-terrorist, Jew-hating Congresswoman. They all rally around her. Whereas Republicans, Steve King was taken down totally, completely wiped out on the basis of something the New York Times said he said. Just think about that for a second.
It would be nice if our media defended us against things that aren't true. Let's just start with that. How about you defend us against things that aren't true? Just that, just only that, to start with.
Let the first instinct be to close ranks, and then you can look once you've closed the ranks. Anyway, I just wanted to say that before we begin.
Thank you, David. I think there's a sense of sort of propriety and manners, which obviously I don't really understand in any context, which I think cripples Republicans in this country. They don't want to sort of make a fuss or be gauche. I'm quite happy to make a fuss and be gauche. I think that Americans sometimes, my experience of this continent is Americans sometimes struggle with people who have style and substance. So if you are funny, they assume you must be an intellectual lightweight. And if you're really smart, then, oh, well, he must be ugly and uninteresting. Not so. So it can be difficult for you. So like, well, like you got Bill Maher on the left. It's like that, but on the right. Oh, and it's like you've unlocked a gateway to a magical kingdom in people's heads. And it's like, we've been telling ourselves on this side for so long that we're useless. We start to believe it. Anyway, thank you so much for that introduction. I myself have been on a journey recently, becoming closer to my faith, and this book is a great whistle-stop tour through how the left excised Christianity from public life and some of why it matters. So I know that you're all going to end up with copies of this and read it, so I want to ask questions that aren't in the book today, give you some added value rather than just repeating sections from that you're going to read anyway. So first of all, David, I want to ask you, taking it as granted that the war on Christianity doesn't come from some place of principled atheism, but rather simply a desire to weaken the West, what is it that makes Christianity so powerful versus capitalism or democracy itself? Why does it seem to be that Christianity was always the number one target? It was always the thing they wanted to take out the most and first, which is why they have and did. What is it that Christianity gives to Christian societies that's so valuable to the West and so poisonous to the forces of
moral
intolerance?
perspective. The left isn't very good at economics or analyzing the real world, or they're so distant from the real world. So everything they do is a moral indictment. And Christianity is the kryptonite to their indictments. The fundamental thing, we can get right into the theology. This book tries to explain, first of all, that the attack on Christianity, it's not a parochial issue. It's not just about one community. It's about our community, whether we're Jews, or whatever we are, atheists. If we believe in the American founding and its principles, then we are committed to what are essentially Christian ideas. They came from Protestant Christians. 98% of the people who settled this country and created it were Protestant Christians. America is a product, a direct product of the Protestant Reformation. I'll just give you one image of that. Before the Reformation, the only way you could get to heaven was through the Catholic Church and its priesthood, which was the true church. And Milo will be much better at this.
Thank you.
But what the Protestant reformers understood was that the church is a human institution, and therefore it's subject to the corruptions. And Milo actually has written a really brilliant book called Diabolical about the corruptions of the Catholic Church.
I did write a book proving your point for you, yes. What a mess the Catholic Church is in.
But it's like my late friend, maybe the only entertaining atheist, Christopher Hitchens, he got it exactly upside down the way the left always does. The title of his book is God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. It's actually human beings who poison religion. And this is the fundamental divide between the left and the right, and why Christians, I could have used Jews, it's basically the same long text, the Judeo-Christian tradition. Because for me, the wisest insights into our predicament are in the first chapters of Genesis, which was written, which is part of the Old Testament, obviously. The flaw in human beings is why utopian schemes are monstrous. The people who think they can remake the world by manipulating and enforcing and killing everybody who stands in their way, that delusion is the most deadly delusion in the history of mankind, that there can be something called social justice, that there can be, or communism or socialism, they're all the same idea. The sanctity of human life, you just start with that. That's the Judeo-Christian idea. Here they are. I never thought I'd live to see the day when the Democratic Party would pass laws legalizing the murder of born children. I mean, there's some kind of figment you can argue before the child is born. I mean, it's getting flimsier and flimsier with the advances of our technology.
It's now 11 minutes in New York, in case you're wondering. Before birth, it's still okay.
Anyway, so it's this fundamental vision of the flawed nature of human beings. And that's, why do we have checks and balances? Why do we have an electoral college? Because the founders did not believe in democracy, because they didn't, they were actually quite brilliant. They created the people as sovereigns. The people in America, it's we the people, are sovereigns. But then they put all these checks and balances on them to prevent them from doing their stupid things that they have a tendency to do. And we're getting it in spades these days. You can just turn on YouTube every day and see an idiot from New York show you why it's, you don't want to you don't want one person, one vote. And the fact that Elizabeth Warren was supposed to be a professor, you should have no respect for professors if they're in the humanities, social science fields. It's completely ignorant of what the Constitution is about. Not to mention Cory Booker. This is irrelevant, but what the hell? This guy went to Oxford and Yale. Yale, it's a disgrace. It shouldn't be. Why it's tax exempt is beyond me. It's not an educational institution. Of course, physics departments and medical departments, they're fine. Cory Booker said we have to get rid of the bigotries in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't mention race. The words black and white don't appear in it. This guy's a moron. And he's also a very treacherous, terrible person. And Betsy DeVos made him. And they attacked her as a racist for...
Well, when you have to keep your sexuality hidden for all of your adult life, it creates some...
I knew Milo would have an insight there.
Why doesn't he just come out? Let's... Not only can I say it, but I can say it as a diss with authority. Let's talk about one of the reasons this has happened. As a lifelong activist, you have insight into this that perhaps very few other people, and perhaps nobody really does. One of the things that's made Christianity easy to excise from public life, and one of the reasons it's not hugely attractive to try to work it back in, is because the version of Christianity we have in America isn't particularly great. Some of the Southern Christian Protestant, those meandering paths that America has taken in Christianity. In the Middle Ages, when Christianity was first taking off, it was the ultimate antidote to racism. And it was Christianity that first invented these principles of colorblindness, because people didn't care in the Middle Ages if you were black or white, merely if you were Christian or not. And that's where the idea of respect for the individual, as well as the king having to pray alongside commoners, that sort of equality before the law, all of these principles are rooted in Judeo-Christian theology. And at the time, it was very radical to say that the king and this peasant were in any way at all the same, especially when it came to being in church. And also consensual marriage. There are all kinds of things that you have no idea come from Christianity. David is right, it is basically everything. Consensual marriage, before Christianity, women didn't have to say, yeah, okay. Chivalry and codes of treating women nicely didn't really exist before Christianity, and still don't where you don't have Christianity. That Middle Ages version of Christianity was full of something that I think perhaps today's Christians in America sometimes lack: joy. Everywhere you look on medieval cathedrals, you've got those ugly gargoyles, and they're all either fiddling with themselves or pulling faces. I mean, on these very grand buildings, you look a little bit closer, and the guy, he's doing what? What's he doing? Next time you walk past like an old Gothic cathedral, like actually look at what the gargoyles are doing. And look. It was full of mischief. Christians in the Middle Ages were always about to break into song, or about to dance, or about to smile or laugh. And it was joy as the sort of soft power of Christianity, making people feel good and happy without merely sinking into Schadenfreude, which seems to be the only source of pleasure for the left. That's one of the things that I think perhaps modern Christianity, having lost many of the best things about its own tradition, could do with rediscovering to make it more attractive again. Have you noticed, though, among some of the younger activists, particularly the people you would imagine to be the most relentlessly atheist, a lot of young conservative activists have started talking about God more recently. Have you noticed that in the last 2 years?
Yeah, well, I think this abortion issue is part of what's inspiring that.
Well, it's sort of a gateway drug, the abortion debate, isn't it? I mean, Republicans have seen abortion as a handicap, as a millstone, as a sort of like, oh yeah, no, look, we're great, honestly, except for the abortion thing. Actually, it's a gateway drug into Christianity, which is, well, let me ask you this.
Well, it's about life, and it's about the individual soul. It's about, the left is collectivist. The Democratic Party is a communist party now. It ranks you according to your race, your gender. That comes up first in everything.
Well, Marxism has to refute Christianity.
And they're collectivists, and if you're Christian or Jewish, you're focused on the individual and his or her eternal life.
This is where individual liberty ultimately comes from.
And part of what I explain in this book, is really Roe v. Wade created the religious right. Until Roe v. Wade, the evangelicals were very skeptical about getting involved in politics. But the Supreme Court is actually liberal. And I think this guy is actually technically a liberal like Dershowitz. Wrote a book calling it The Most Dangerous Branch. And I think I said this the other day, but if you think of the Supreme Court, it's 9 lawyers appointed for life by politicians. Now, how could that go wrong? And they have no obvious regard for principles, for consistency. They embrace hypocrisy as a way of life. So they invented this right to privacy. It's Planned Parenthood lawyers who came up with this bogus idea as the foundation for Roe v. Wade. Well, as Rehnquist pointed out in his dissent, there's nothing private about an abortion. It's a woman, a doctor, and the unspoken, the unborn child. So when they did that, what the Supreme Court, I really think there should be some kind of reform of the court. I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't know what John Marshall did to make it. The Judicial Review, Louis could school me on this, I'm sure. But it's got to be stopped. Because what the Supreme Court did, it circumvents the whole democratic process. Instead of debating abortion in legislatures across the country, these 9 appointed for life lawyers made a decision, and it changed the fundamental law of the nation overnight in every community. So this was a direct assault upon the Bible Belt and all these religious communities. All the big religious right organizations, the political ones, were formed in the 5 or 6 years after Roe v. Wade. And this political coalition that was created, at one point the moral majority had 4 million members. First they elected Ronald Reagan, then they elected Donald Trump. That's what the war is. If you focus on what's happening to Christians now, you get a direct insight into where the war is over this country and over all your freedoms. Because if you don't have freedom of conscience and freedom of speech, you don't have any freedoms. You can't defend them.
It's funny, ordinary church-going Christians are a lot smarter in many cases than their own bishops and priests. We know this from our own world in politics, where the conservative base versus the Republican Party establishment. People know, voters out there know, that when you vote for a president, you're not voting for Jesus. It's a Marxist thing, expecting to have heaven on earth. Trying to create utopia in human civilization is a Marxist project. So you don't vote for a man who is the paragon of virtue, because you're not voting for a Christ-like figure in office. You're voting for a politician, which is why you can overlook some of Donald Trump's personal habits and characteristics and whatever else he gets up to, and to know that he's going to do the job that you've elected him to do without requiring him to be the perfect vision of the moral man. Most Christians in the conservative press couldn't understand and couldn't cope with Trump because he wasn't a paragon of virtue. But voters understood that he didn't need to be, because they're actually Christian. They know the difference. So all of the things that you will have sort of intuited, picked up on in politics, it all starts in the same place. It starts with Christianity. I'm going to ask you a theological question. There are some think tanks who do great work in this area. The Baylor Institute, for instance, they come up with all these amazing studies that show how basically Christians are just nicer to each other. And if you want to build a society, it would be much better off if all your citizens are Christian, because they don't steal from each other, they give to charity, they're just generally nicer to one another. Does it matter to you whether Christianity is literally true? Or do you...
I'm glad you asked me that.
Do you mind? Do you care? Because if you want to build a free, happy, generous society, the best way is to make it Christian.
Up to a point, because people will abuse the religion and use it as a weapon.
Right.
And will a hellfire and damnation preachers. When I came out of the left, when I saw the left was a destructive, evil force, it's just it just hates America. That's its motivation. There never was an of course, I was part of the 60s generation, and the big thing was the anti-war movement. It wasn't an anti-war movement, it was an anti-American movement. And you know that because it forced the United States to betray its allies in Vietnam. And when America left, the communists proceeded to slaughter 2.5 million people. There wasn't a single protest. They don't give a fig about the Vietnamese. They don't care about blacks. They don't care about minorities. They just consume. It's a party of hate, is what it is. Anyway, when I saw that, I spent. Those of you who know my biography know that that kind of turning point was a murder by the Black Panthers of a woman that I had recruited. I spent 7 years kind of rethinking everything. And I wanted to understand America. I saw the difference that in America, when America did things that were bad, there was an agonizing reappraisal. There was a whole mechanisms for trying to prevent it from ever happening again, whereas the left just covered it, that doesn't miss a beat. They're proud. The leadership of the Democratic Party is proud that it got 2.5 million Indo-Chinese killed by the communists. There isn't a leader of the Democratic Party who wouldn't be proud of being part of that terrible, terrible movement. So when you look at it, you just look at the founding. We're endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, radicals, that's what they think is part of their social justice, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But it can't be inalienable. That is, it can't be inalienable. You can't not take it away unless there's a God who gave it. If government gives it, government can snatch it away, and they'll do it in a heartbeat. They have, I mean, we've had this, I love that phrase, teaching moment. We've had 2 years of a teaching moment of how completely untrustworthy, devious, and dangerous so-called liberals are. Anyway, so that's an easy idea to see, but not so easy for an agnostic, which is what I am. Just means I don't know, to embrace. And then I realized you have to either have a God or you have to have respect for the belief in God and respect for the people who believe in God in order to defend your freedoms. If you enjoy your American freedoms, that's very basic. So to me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think that one would be happier. I mean, I've written about this in my books. I mean, like when Mozart was 35, he knew the purpose of life was, the goal was death. And he got up every morning and was creative because he had the comfort of having a creator who was watching over him. And I said, you know, I really wish I can see the benefits of that. But it's not essential, since atheism is a faith and religion is a faith. If you have the faith, good. I mean, I think it's very beneficial. But if you don't, it doesn't make a difference because nobody knows. I think it was Novak who wrote to me once and said, nobody gets to see God. We see through a glass darkly, and only then face to face.
I think if you are struggling with whether or not you believe in something, you can try to look at some of the indicators of what might make for a good belief system. So Feuerbach, the German philosopher, talked about, he was an atheist, but he said you can tell what a civilization holds most dear from its religion. Christianity, self-sacrifice, and love. Those are the two enduring principles at the heart of Christianity. They are the crucifixion, they're Christ and the resurrection. Self-sacrifice and love. Perhaps joy as a close third. Look at Islamic societies. Obedience, the ability to follow the rules. What a religion most prizes is the key to unlocking what is the soul of that civilization. So if you want to make people nice to one another, it might be nice to pick a religion that holds love and self-sacrifice as the highest virtues, as the highest principles. So should we teach prayer in school?
Well, yeah, this is the way they draw. Of course, when the left talks, the left is very conscious of the fact that if it told you where it was going, you'd string them up from the nearest lamppost. So they lie. I mean, to be a leftist is to be committed to lying about your political agendas. So in 1962, there was the founder of the New York ACLU, an evil organization, it was 5 people, none of whom were especially religious, who brought a suit and got it to the Supreme Court. And they were rejected in 3 appeals courts because it was a frivolous suit against a non-denominational prayer in the schools. It's just completely innocuous. Something like, Almighty God, thank you for protecting me, my parents, and our country. Amen. Something like that. And that Supreme Court decided that violated the Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause of the Constitution. This is let me just back up one thing about this Protestant revolution that created America. As I said, before the Protestant Reformation, you could only get to heaven through the Catholic Church and its priesthood. And there were two central doctrines of the Protestant Reformation. One was salvation by grace. And what that means is that we're all sinners. None of us deserves to get into heaven. So the only way you get there is by a divine grace. And that's why we have the checks and balances and everything, and why we should be distrustful of all utopians. The second idea was called the priesthood of all believers. Think of that for a second. The idea is that each individual confronts his or her maker one-on-one, without the intermediary of a priesthood or a state. Very important. Because as you know, well, just to pick England, because it's kind of our parent country, when Henry VIII got tired of beheading his wives, he just changed the religion of England overnight, established it, and then proceeded to persecute the other religions. So we were founded by all these Protestant sects who were fleeing persecution. That's why we have a secular state, because they don't want to establish a religion. And actually, if you're a Protestant, nobody can tell you what it means to, they can tell you what it means to be a Christian, but they don't have an authority from God to say what a Christian is. It's an incredibly revolutionary idea. It's equality. It says if you're a black slave, you're a child of God, and therefore you're on an equal plane, the priesthood of all believers. You're dealing one-on-one with your Maker for whatever reason He created you and whatever reason that you're in this situation. Incredibly revolutionary idea. And this is what's under assault by the left, the collectivists of the left in this country.
Well, there's many points of theological difference that we will skip over there between the two of us, but
you're a Catholic.
Certainly we can agree that the roots of individual liberty, having respect for the bodily autonomy, the bodily integrity and the personal autonomy of the individual, starts with Christianity, and we have it too. Thank you. But certainly Protestants took it to the next level by sweeping the church out.
So they banned prayer. I lost that thought. The Supreme Court bans prayer in the schools. The idea that one 23-word prayer establishes a religion is idiotic. Doesn't matter. It's the Supreme Court.
They'd probably be okay with the Shahada, though.
Yeah, no question. No question. But what they did was they took that, as I said, the left is always lying. So it's never, and this woman Cortez is wonderful because she blurts out the end, which is a big mistake.
She tells too much of the truth.
Without thinking about it, I don't think she's capable actually of thinking. But so what they did was they took that, and through a series of other decisions, one was the next suit was, or a subsequent suit was brought by Madalyn Murray O'Hair. How many people know that name? She was the founder of Atheists of America. She was a lunatic. Oh, I mean that literally. She tried to defect to the Soviet Union with her family. She was a communist right before she launched this campaign. She blamed Christians for killing her father, whereas what actually happened was she hated her father, and they always had these bloody fights. And the morning one morning while the Supreme Court decision was actually pending, she said to him, she said, "I hope you die and I'll put your body in the trash." This was breakfast talk. And stormed out. And this poor old guy, although having raised a daughter like that, there's some dessert there, I think, goes to the A&P and at the cash register has a heart attack. She blamed Christians for his death. She invented persecution by Christians. When she went to defect to the Soviet Union, the Kremlin wouldn't let her in because they knew she was a lunatic. But the Supreme Court treated this like it's a serious case, and it eliminated Bible reading in the school. So now, you can't mention, you can of course mention Islam. You can of course mention that Hopi Indians pray to Mother Earth. Can't mention that Christians pray to Jesus. And you can't teach public school children that the Pilgrims were Christians or that the first Thanksgiving was a Thanksgiving to God. They've wiped out religion in the public square, basically. And unfortunately, conservatives have this reflex always, we're going to homeschool our kids, we're going to take, Kennedy, when they passed this decision of ending prayer in the schools, he said, "We'll pray at home." That's a retreat. This is a war.
I thought that was the Protestant way.
All right.
What do you need
We're not
churches
going to
for?
bring up your Pope. Go ahead, Mike.
As one of the many benefits of having an organized religion and church hierarchy is that it embeds itself as an institution in the fabric of the nation in a way that Protestant churches can't and don't.
This is true.
And too much
But
focus
if
on
you're a
individual-
Democrat, if you're an American, you value, it is, of course, it leads to a kind of anarchy.
Well,
But it's nothing as simple. I'm in a state now where the sheriffs, the communists who were in the governor's house, and then they took over the legislature, I want to confiscate guns. And the sheriffs have declared their districts sanctuaries for guns. So, you can see how quickly it all goes to anarchy, but I kind of like this little twist.
we're in the sort of chaotic, late decadent phase of America, aren't we? Just before it plunges off the, off the edge of the cliff.
It's
quite exciting, that sort of vertigo as you look over the abyss, into total chaos and complete societal failure. This is what Rome felt like before the Visigoths sacked the city, All right, so we'll say the verdict was you're sort of comfortable with prayer in schools, maybe, but definitely with prayer.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it.
But teaching it to...
we used to do it, I was there, before they banned it. And we used to say the Lord's Prayer, which is a Christian prayer, actually. My mother was, even though my mother was a communist and an atheist, she was upset about this, but I kind of liked the words in elementary school. Lead us not into temptation, for thine is the power, the kingdom, and the glory.
I don't think there's any shame as a Jew in borrowing things from Christianity. After all, we gave... the whole of psychotherapy is a reinvention of the confessional booth. This is one of many ways in which we cross-pollinate, So, let's talk about sex. Because when I think about you, the first thought that always goes through my head is, what a hunk.
Is my wife here?
No, it's this. Your brain gets a bit muddled when you're homosexual. Sodomite, as Ilhan would say. And you end up sort of, it's like you jump tracks, and some of your brain works a bit like a woman, and some of your brain works a bit like a man. And David's level of sort of tirelessness and bravery is very attractive. So it's a very remarkable thing. I switch on my woman brain, I'm like, yeah, I totally would. Right. Let's talk about sex. the sexual revolution in particular. You have a chapter on it in the book.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to make everyone gay, in the sense of, I mean that seriously, when you take away the restraining influence of women from men, and you just leave men to have sex with men, we go crazy. You know, too much of it, all kinds of weird and wonderful things. It's almost as though that restraining influence, the things that Christianity again invented, whether it was chivalry, codes of courtship, you know, Christianity actually elevated women in a way they had never been considered in Western civilization before by giving them equal status with men. They had to say, I do as well in marriage, which prior to that had not been the case. And they had to be treated nicely. They had to be treated respectfully because they were mothers and because they were homemakers and because they were building the home that, after all, you were going out to work to build in the first place. Christianity put women in their right and proper place as objects of veneration and love and respect, a position they hadn't occupied before that. Seems like the sexual revolution is determined to make women as grubby and and dreadful as men are when it comes to sex. Remove all of those polite codes of obligation, all of those things that made social and sexual relationships healthy, good for society and good for the individuals concerned, and replace all of society's sexual ethics with a bathhouse.
Yeah. Yes, romance is on the run. Milo's referring to a chapter in this book. I did, Peter Collier and I actually did one of the first articles on AIDS, at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. And of course the left, well, the other part of that Garden of Eden story, you remember what the serpent says to Adam and Eve. They have it's better than social justice, Eden. It's better than communism. You don't die. There's no pain, and you know all the things. Childbirth. But the condition is you cannot eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can't want to know evil. And the way the serpent seduces Adam and Eve says, if you eat of that tree, you shall be as God. This is why these people are so dangerous and so evil. They think of themselves as gods. They think if they get in, you notice when Cortez talks about her plan, her model is a military mobilization. It's all top down. It's to force people into the program. They're totalitarians.
She even calls herself the boss.
They have no humility. That's why they have no respect for other people. In the 80s, and the gay left, this is a chapter about how gay leftists killed 200,000-300,000 young gay men, healthy. They defied they don't believe in the laws of nature to begin with. And I debated them at the time. So I know the mentality really well. But they destroyed the public health system. I once interviewed the guy from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, who was in charge of fighting the epidemic. And I asked him about testing, for example. I don't know if you remember this, but the gays said testing was homophobic. Not the gays, it was the gay left, the leaders. I said, why do you need tests? He said, well, if it's like smallpox and it appears immediately on the surface, you don't really need a test. You can see the whole way you fight an epidemic is you take the carriers and you separate them from potential targets. Pretty simple and elementary. And he said, but with AIDS, the latency period was almost 10 years before any signs appeared. So testing was absolutely crucial to fighting this epidemic, and there was no testing. And that's partly because Republicans quit the field, and why should they, get carved up and called names? And
Trying to save people's lives.
And the Democrats, well, I understand. And the Democrats were completely in bed with the gay Marxists, is what they were.
And to give you a window into what happens when Republicans leave the field, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Now that Republicans have given up worrying about gay issues because every time they try to do some good or express themselves, they get yelled out of it. Now there are posters on public transportation trying to destigmatize HIV. Telling gay people, oh, you can have sex with people with HIV now, it's fine. This is it. They fall into the aesthetic of the body positivity posters, and sort of taking something horrific like AIDS or obesity, and trying to make it a desirable or even an aspirational lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
That's how it's now being presented, with a handsome man, of course Spanish. And encouraging you. I'm going to find the poster. I'm going to give you the wording in a minute while you're carrying on. Encouraging you not to worry if he has HIV.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when Republicans quit the field. They find new and even more horrendous ways to kill people.
I quote a courageous gay who died in the epidemic. When he was very young, they come out of the middle of the country and into these urban disease pots. And he said he was persuaded by the radical leadership of the gay movement. He said, every time I get the clap, I'm striking a blow for the revolution. That's the quote. They're doing it again. I mean, they're promoting, well, I don't get into the drug epidemics, but it's amazing how the left enables this, how they don't want to recognize any of the limits that we have as human beings, which is another thing that Christians, believers, people who've read Genesis understand that there are limits. There's an angel with a flaming sword at the gates of Eden to prevent our return. The only way you can redeem this world is through a divine grace.
You sound like a believer to me.
Well,
I found this poster, by the way.
I don't know. I mean, I know that that's true. I don't know that there is the divine grace. We'll see.
Well, Aristotle would say a lifetime of good habits builds good character and good morals.
He was very sensible, wasn't he?
Perhaps you should start going to church, and one day you'll wake up and realize. One day you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm Christian. I'll take you to Mass.
I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of those emails.
Yeah, I get a lot of those emails. Yeah, most of them are from me. And what a state your life has to be in to get moral advice from Milo Yiannopoulos. This is the poster which is on New York Transit. You can't see him, but there's a man. His name is Hernando, which you know because it has it in a cursive script. It says I won't transmit HIV to anyone. It's crossed out, and it says I can't transmit HIV to anyone. Medication makes my HIV undetectable. There's not enough virus to expose my partner. Undetectable.org. Basically encouraging gay men to have unprotected sex with people who may have or do have HIV. And can anybody guess which community suffers the most from stuff like this? Anyone guess? Not gays, I mean, but like which?
It'd be blacks.
Exactly. 1 in 2 gay black Americans will come into contact with HIV, meaning get it in their lives. No. There's only so much cancer you can embrace in a day. Actually I didn't, and I will. But what they basically say is, if the guy's in this certain sort of treatment, and it's caught early enough, the science only says that there's little risk, but the state of New York is telling you that there's no risk. Half of all gay black Americans will get HIV, partly because of stuff like this. Thanks, the left. Some of you may know, that has a particularly horrible effect on me. Okay, so freedom of religion. Seems like we have freedom of religion and freedom of conscience, but if you're a Christian, you're on your own. Meaning, if you are Muslim, you'll get all kinds of dispensations and niceties and favors and sort of special pleadings. But if you're a Christian, you kind of, no, I'm sorry, separation of church and state. You can get a clue as to what these laws are really about and what people are trying to do from the way they're implemented and the asymmetry between how different religions are treated. I know the answer to my question, but you're going to give a better version of it than I could. What is it about Islam that the left loves so much?
They hate America.
Right. But that's Muslims. What is it about Islam?
I'm actually puzzled. It takes maybe 10 minutes to see what a diseased religion Islam is. You just go up on the internet, and it's beyond me how they don't actually see it. And I can only think it's because Islam has declared war on America, and that's their allies.
They must see it, and they must like it.
It's something I wrote, actually, in 2004 book, Unholy Alliance.
Yes,
the enemy of
the
enemy of my enemy is my friend.
I think also perhaps they see...
And they hate Christians, and so do Muslims.
They have a lot of the same enemies. Perhaps also, there's a sort of character to Islam. There's a sort of character of disingenuousness. It's that taqiyya, the sort of two-facedness of Islam, which I think you find...
They've made a religious obligation out of lying.
Right. So to the strict letter of the faith, Catholics are sort of like, torn up about little white lies. Christians in general induced not to lie if they can possibly avoid it. And if you go to church sometimes the priests will have a sort of Rolodex of strategies so you can avoid lying to the milkman. Don't tell them something that's not true, but you can tell them something that suggests something that's not true, but you don't actually, Christians like agonized by this stuff. And this is confessional, this is why we have psychotherapy. But sort of the false consciousness, the two-facedness, the taqiyya, the disingenuousness seems to be a feature of Islam, seems to be baked in. And perhaps the left sees in that totalitarian system some of the same characteristics that it recognizes from home, from itself, and sees an ally in the war on freedom. What kind of... Let's talk about practical matters. You might say, well, this is all well and good, and that's sad, but wasn't this battle lost now decades ago? Obviously, if you want to save America, you have to save Christianity. And I think most of us on the front lines of the culture wars recognize this. Some of us have come to this realization in the last couple of years. Some of us have known it for a long time. If you want to save America, you must save Christianity as well, because the two are inseparable, existing in intricate symbiosis. There have been books been written about how capitalism is impossible without the Protestant work ethic, which I think is slightly overstated, but there's something in there about how these two systems grew up together in harmony. So this book is a great tour through all of that. But what do we do now?
Well, I think it's true for both Christians and just political conservatives. They've been somewhat complacent about the way the world is going. The left has had a free rein. I mean, they've destroyed our school system, taken complete control of it from kindergarten through graduate school. They're teaching kindergartners about gender fluidity, that they can be anything they want. I mean, this is the thing. they're like, I don't know, out of control children, leftists. They don't want any hampering of their. But with the Christians, as I said, very skeptical about this world and fighting in this world. And it's really big. And the left has totally infiltrated the evangelical movement.
My answer to this question was going to...
1 minute?
My answer to this question was going to be learn from your enemies.
I've always said the left is terrific at political war.
Right.
They have no substance, no intellectual substance, no morality, but they're really good at taking you down. And I've always used this line that sometimes I think I was sent as a former radical to teach conservatives and Christians bad manners, but I think it's like 10%.
You were successful. I learned them. I was put in a moral quandary recently when I saw, and this is happening all the time in Europe now, a report that in Birmingham, children were being removed from LGBT awareness lessons in schools. I thought, oh, good. A bit less indoctrination, a bit less, 7-year-olds being taught about sodomy. Great. And then it dawned on me, wait, Birmingham, they're Muslim. So the Muslim parents are pulling their kids out of the left's LGBT equality lessons because they are incompatible with our beliefs. And they say, get this, that the LGBT equality classes are discriminatory against Muslims. We have a word for this, it is chutzpah. And this is the sort of thing that Christians should do with a straight face, isn't it? And just start demanding the same privileges that are afforded to other religions. And just say, no, this isn't happening. My children won't be attending this, period.
Yes. Yeah, you take a leaf out of the left's playbook.
It's quite a dilemma, isn't it? It's sort of like, oh, it's good, but it's Muslims doing it for the wrong reasons.
My image is this son of a bitch, Schiff, saying that Donald Trump is deeply unpatriotic. This is from a traitor. This guy is a traitor. This guy has spent 2 years sabotaging an elected president of the United States and damaging this country. If I hear Republicans talking or conservatives, they're so nice to these guys. They would never say anything like that. Well,
you and Roger Stone are the only people I hear talk as bluntly.
But we're not
Schiff.
in the political. Yeah, I want a political. I mean, Schiff, he's the head of the Intelligence Committee. I want to see somebody in that kind of position calling them out for their treason.
Yeah, but it's that chutzpah, that's required.
Well, you can imagine the firestorm if somebody said or just calling them racist, which is what they are.
Somebody pointed something out to me. I guess we should wrap up. Recently, that
we have to wrap up because it's way over a minute.
Okay. I'll do it quickly.
Anyway.
I'll do it quickly. No, not yet. I'll do it quickly because you're going to find this useful. When somebody calls you a racist, this is far worse than somebody who casually drops the N-word. Because when you call somebody that name, the only person who looks bad is you. Whereas when you call somebody a racist, you are creating a set of obligations for them to defend themselves, which will, whatever they do, indelibly associate their name with that crime. Way worse. Those kinds of things, bearing those in mind, having those little strategies and bravery, we can all only hope to imitate some small sliver of David's greatness, but baby steps. Thank you very much, everybody. And,